What's up, y'all? It's me, DJ LV, with Canapolitan Magazine and the Bay Sesh, 89.5 FM, KZCT, OzCat Radio, Vallejo. I am here in New York City at the Javits Center at this Cannabis World Business Expo 2023. And I discovered a really exciting new organization and person here to interview, and I'm so very pleased. As you know, I represent the Northern Cheyenne Nation, and I always try to incorporate Native American everything into my show and whatnot, but I've been a little lost all these years. I haven't found any other. I've certainly found other Native stoners, other Native growers, but organized Native cannabis organizations is brand new to me. I'm here in New York. There's a big culture of them growing upstate in New York on the reses that I know about. I haven't had a chance to check them out. But regardless of this, I'm here with this amazing woman, Mary Jane Oatman, who's the executive director of the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association and the founder of THC, which is a magazine which stands for Tribal Health, Hemp, and Cannabis. What's up, Mary? I'm so pleased that you're here with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's such an honor to be at the expo. This is my first expo ever. I've done tons of them on the West Coast, and the vibe and energy of what's happening here at the Javits Center is magnetic.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that there's a space and you're creating the space for natives here. So tell me a little more about the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association briefly. First, we are going to get an in-detail interview from the founder as well. And then I want to hear about the magazine. Also, you said you grow and you smoke. Are you growing right now?
I have hemp growing right now. I'm making a little bit of a pivot from being a ganja guerrilla farmer in Idaho to exploring more of the industrial fiber hemp. But I absolutely believe and am deeply rooted in the concept of know your farmer. And so I've always had family farmers. And so my brothers are all cultivators as well. So I don't have as much pressure to grow my own medicine this year. They all support me being out on this advocacy trail and campaign to protect the rights of Indigenous peoples and tribal nations in cannabis. And that's what we do at the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association as the nation's first 501c6 trade organization, is we get a lobby, and we get a lobby for the rights of Indigenous people. And we're also deeply rooted in education for and about Indigenous communities, and creating data for our tribal nations to make informed policy decisions.
Wow. For those of you who are listening and might not understand the potential and need for tribal sovereignty, but tribes have, as part of our tribal sovereignty rights, we have the rights to have our own businesses tax-free if they're operating on res. You'll see that coming out a lot in the casinos is a good example, but there's a history there of a little bit of, I don't know what the word would be, but, tribes basically not getting their fair payout from that, getting manipulated, getting into debt from outsiders. And so we have, as tribal nations and individually each tribes, tried and we have the huge opportunity to be sovereign, and cannabis is such a huge opportunity with that. But it's been complicated because a lot of tribes have been so poor that we depend on tribal funding, like my tribe, on federal funding. So there's a conflict of interest there, obviously, with it still being federally illegal. But if there's a way and an opportunity, which I think you all are finding and beginning to find, and also bring across intertribally for us to become independent with cannabis and hemp, it will be huge for us, as well as like the medicinal and healing properties that we need, because of course it's the healing of the nations, and we need that deeply on our tribes. How have you felt like that's happening so far with what you all have accomplished? When did you start?
So the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association is a brand new organization. We actually just started in the summer of 2022. But prior to that, and the reason that I'm serving in this capacity as the executive director, is our founder, Rob Perro, saw the work that I was doing in Indigenous communities to tell the stories of the successful tribes in cannabis And I was doing that with THC Magazine, which is the nation's first print publication dedicated to all things tribal, hemp, and cannabis. And through that work, what we were finding is that tribes, more than anybody else in this nation, know how to run complex regulated systems. We've been doing it since the introduction of Indian gaming, very, very regulated by the federal government. And because a lot of our tribal lands are federal Indian lands, a lot of those tribal nations are afraid to cultivate. So what we were doing was finding the blueprint tribes, those tribes that have taken it beyond a proof of concept to full business development, vertically integrated facilities, a high bar for compliance and regulation, because it's about public safety. It really is, at the end of the day, interesting to hear how the conversation always shifts towards taxes and who's making, the money and the fees. But for us, it's really, know your farmer and creating safe, quality access to this medicine, as well as for our organization, propping up the concepts of regenerative farming and living soil, because that is unfortunate that this commodification is happening of this beautiful feminine spirit. And I think that's the other thing that we bring, is that she has a voice, and we want to help amplify that voice, and remind people that this is a revitalization of plant medicines in our community. This is nothing new. You're not teaching us anything new. And that most of the pharmaceuticals are derived from the taking of indigenous plant knowledge and plant entheogens from, since contact period, and turning them into pharmaceuticals. And so it's really important for us to remind people that plant medicines are our inherent human right.
Indeed. I got to share real quick. I got a friend, shout out to Sweet Peach Kiss. She's an independent grower up in Northern California. She grows her own medicine. She makes her own hash. And she also actually told me, she had an interesting story with me. She cured herself with some cervical cancer by microdosing peyote, which is a whole new area. And I know my uncle, shout out to my uncle, he goes around hunting for the black roses, and like my dad says, he's been tripping since the 70s. But do you anticipate, is that a conversation that's happening right now? Is like anticipating things like peyote medicine or psilocybin and being incorporated into like the conversation?
So that's an interesting space that we do as an advocacy organization, is also working with partner organizations that come to us and they think that we're just going to sign on because they're supporting opening up certain plant entheogens and medicines to the population at large, of reminding them that peyote is already a sacred protected medicine in indigenous communities. We have already had the right to use and access peyote, and so we do not want to see, because there are a lot of conservation issues around peyote, how and where it is harvested and gathered, is that we want to ensure that there's not a retail or a recreational nuance to such a sacred medicine such as peyote that is already protected. And so right now it feels like we need to maintain that position of it being protected for the rights and use of indigenous spirituality. A lot of the mushroom cultivars that are across this nation are aboriginal to these lands. And so again, it's another one of those reminders of reconnecting our tribal communities to a way of life that they already had and that has just been slightly fractured, and that they just need to go back to our natural ways of healings. We've been living under these very complex Indian health systems for quite a while, and we see that they're not beneficial to our people. And they're, governed by priorities that are not of our community. And so eliminating any kind of stigma around Mother Earth's medicine is what we're all about. And with THC Magazine, I have been able to find our tribal entrepreneurs as well as our tribal advocacy groups that are out there helping to protect the already protected, as well as providing the education to take a new pathway for medicine. And it's really about health sovereignty. This is not about waiting for permission to heal ourselves anymore.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh, you're so amazing. I do want to backtrack real quick. I'm so curious. You said you and your brother's growing, and I'm from Northern California. You know, we grow what we grow. What were you? Were you growing? And also, what are you growing in the hemp area?
So I'm in Idaho, and I've been really bold about my position. My grandmother went to federal prison when I was in elementary school for growing this beautiful plant. And my grandma's 85 years old right now and still in Idaho, would face very similar penalties. And so it really feels like every single Supreme Court case that's out there that protects the rights of indigenous people for fishing, for hunting, for harvesting, gathering, it was all an individual or a family member that was exercising that right, not a government, not a tribe. And so it's really important to continue to exercise sovereignty and not again wait for that permission. And it's sad that a lot of our tribes are waiting for permission. They're waiting for guidance. They're waiting for the BIA to tell them what to do. Meanwhile, a lot of our legacy families have been doing it. So in Idaho, in the area that I grow in, we have to start indoor. You have to get some good starts going, or you have to go and see your cousins on the other reserves in Oregon or California, and maybe try to find some way to pack home some beautiful clones. But I mean, this whole concept of trade economy for this medicine, it's always been happening in the since time immemorial, this traditional trade of and commerce of. And so I really I'm really excited to see my own family have the opportunity to figure out a legal pathway. But right now, it's about taking care of ourselves and our community, and not so much about the green rush. We're still trying to clean up from the bad actors of the gold rush in our communities.
Right. Well, I mean, you are championing tribal sovereignty in a major way, and I gotta thank you and commend you, because you're doing what I dream to do. But that it's not an I, it's a we. We are, we are a tribe. We're a tribal life. Like you're my sister. You know what I mean? You really are. Like, it's not like a joke. So thank you, sister, for doing what you do. And like, this is just the beginning. I really, I'll do my best, and like, I hope we can really bring all the nations together, on this, and heal tribes individually and create a sustainable business model of sovereignty for tribes that is our right from the treaty that really hasn't really been achieved yet. And I just think it would be so beautiful to do through this plant. And I appreciate the respect that you're giving to the sacredness of the other plants. And I do believe also, like, I don't really like seeing the commodification and the commercialization of our sacred plants, because this with the psychedelics, there's a lot of honor that needs to go into that, of spirit and everything, that just can't happen in a pharmaceutical lab. And it's a whole bigger conversation, obviously.
The way that I've always seen it, and it was, it's not this like, foofy indigenous, motto. It's something that's very, very real, and it comes from, I guess a perspective that is not seen in the mainstream cannabis industry, that this gift has a huge responsibility. And I think that word responsibility is lost in this cannabis industry. But we've always had this, reciprocity with this medicine. And that's why we're so honored to be able to continue to gather indigenous communities to eliminate the negative stigma. We did so with our first annual Indigenous Cannabis Policy Summit in Washington, D.C., and we're going to be returning November 15th and 16th to Washington, D.C. for our second annual policy conference. Come one, come all, tribes, allies, and that's really where I think our organization is unique, is that we are bringing on allies that are ready to throw down for this fight for indigenous peoples, because they are the ones that understand the responsibility.
Goosebumps all over. This is just like a dream come true to me. And what was the thing that you guys were talking about that's coming up in Southern California real soon?
Oh, yeah. So next week, the ICIA is taking it from New York, going back over to the West Coast, and we're going to be participating in the 8th annual Native Nations Hemp and Cannabis Conference at the Pechanga Resort in Temecula, California.
Amazing. So this is like next level natives right here. You heard it first. at least on the base edge, Canapolitan Magazine. I'm gonna let you go because there's a line of people over here waiting to talk to you. I can't take up all her time at this event. You're visiting from Idaho and New York, so thank you so much. Please tell everybody where they can buy your magazine, where they can follow all of this.
Check the magazine out at indigenouscannabis.org and the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association is at Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association, indigenouScannabis.org. Yes.
And I'm going to put the link in the bio.
And if you're just wanting to check out some crazy antics from some res girl that, is a guerrilla farmer in Idaho, Mary Jane _flower girl on Instagram.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to give me this interview. And this is to be continued because there's going to be lots of updates. It's just the beginning, y'all. DJ LV, Base Edge, Canapolitan Magazine, Jarvis Center, New York City. We love you.